Alright, today we're going to be ranking all 46 songs on the Hamilton soundtrack. And so I'm just going to go through, give a few points of why I like them or maybe why they're in the position they're at. Disclaimer that I like the entire soundtrack. So just because something is lower than some other things doesn't mean I think it's a bad song. I think they're all good in their own way. This is actually really tough to rank. So there's that. This list is all my opinion. So my top 10 may be different than some other people's top 10s, but that's fine because this is my brain. So we'll just get right to it. So in last place, number 46, is Farmer Refuted. So this is when he confronts the messenger, I guess you call him, Samuel Seabury. Hamilton is the he. And he just kind of interrupts his message over and over again and keeps yelling over him. And as a visual thing, I think this is much better because you see Hamilton's pushing him around and stuff. But as a song, it's just kind of a lot of overlapping audio, and it's got a nice little bit of humor quality to it. But it's nothing too special. Definitely not compared to some of the other things when we get higher on this list. With that, we'll get to number 45, which is going to be SCHUYLER Defeated. That is when Aaron Burr takes over Philip Schuyler's spot. Philip is, I think his name's Philip, is Alexander Hamilton's father-in-law. He steals his spot in the Senate pretty much. He switches his political party and everything because he sees the opportunity. Hamilton is mad at him for switching parties. We hear a nice little dialogue between Eliza and Philip about just kind of what happened. Philip's angry, Eliza's calm as usual, and their dialogue I think is pretty good, and it's what gets it over Farmer Refuted for me. At 44, we have A Winter's Ball. And so just like the other two, this one's pretty short. It's just Aaron Burr doing his usual intro with Hamilton at first, and then he moves into saying that they're reliable with the ladies, and then they kind of dance around. Oof. And they do that hey, 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 and they're all hooked together and they got their arms up and stuff. It's a fun scene. It builds up to the ball pretty nicely, and it shows how fun the show can be at times before we get to the sadder ending. But it is really short, and it doesn't really have a whole lot to it. So it is at number 44. For 43, we have the shortest song on the album, I believe, and that is Best of Wives and Best of Women. It's like 48 seconds or so. And it's just, it's pretty sad. It's Hamilton's last goodbye, unknowingly, to Eliza. And he's all calm and nonchalant. He's like, yeah, just go back to bed. I'll be gone before you even realize, or I'll be back before you realize I'm gone. And Eliza's trying to convince him just to come to sleep, and he doesn't listen. And he goes out right after this and has the duel that gets him killed. It's pretty sad when you think about how nonchalant the song is presented, and how, especially how short it is. You know, it's just a quick goodbye to the wife. You're going to be out in the town for a little bit, and you'll be back home, and then you never get to come home. And neither one of you realize that during that conversation. So it's pretty sad, but it is really short. I think it's perfect for how it's supposed to be, but it lands in 43 just because a lot of these other songs have more substance to them and can convey the same sadness and ominous, and they have a little more fun to them. So coming up next, we have number 42, which is Meet Me Inside. And on this song, George Washington is mad about Hamilton for being involved in the duel that gets Charles Lee shot in the side. And he's trying to give him a stern talking. He's calling him son, and Hamilton eventually yells, "Call me son one more time," to which George Washington responds with sending him home. It shows, I like the song a good bit for what it is. You see George Washington's wisdom and kind of fatherly like experience to Hamilton, and then you see Hamilton's angsty teen phase, so to say, and he's all fired up and he's mad and doesn't want to keep being called son, but his fieriness cost him his job for a little bit this time. But I like this for the character building that it has in it. It's still going to be down here, and 42 for me, just because it's I don't know, it's just missing something, I guess, to me. At 41, we have the Adams administration, and this one is quick and fun. It's just kind of a little interlude to explain another fall for Hamilton. John Adams is elected president, and he fires Alexander Hamilton. And Hamilton publishes a response, which he insults Adams in. Madison declares that Hamilton's no longer a problem because he's lost his job and he's attacking the only important party member he has left. But Jefferson says no, he's still an issue as long as he can write, and so they have to go confront him. And we get to that later in the song We Know. But this one's this low on the list because it is fun, but it's short still, and really there's not a whole lot to it. It's just kind of like, hey, John Adams is president now, and Hamilton doesn't like him. Also, Hamilton was fired, and that's kind of where we end from there. Number 40, we have Cabinet Battle number 2. First off, I like that the cabinet battles are rap battles. I think that's a really cool take on history. It's just a fun way to help incorporate the hip hop themes. And I put number 2 here because I think while this battle is pretty good, and it does set up some more tension between Hamilton and Jefferson, it's not as important, and I don't like the ending as much as I like the other one. And as a whole, I think the cabinet battles aren't like top tier on the album or anything, so they're both kind of low. But this one is before the first one because of the ending, pretty much. But this one is cool. It sets up Jefferson as being the France lover. We know he spent the whole war in France, and then he's trying to defend France here. But then Washington takes Hamilton's side and says, no, you can't help every revolution that happens, or will be crippled. And I think it's cool for story building because we see Jefferson being fed up that Washington's always backing him. We see Hamilton kind of still cocky and just taunting Jefferson a lot. And we get at the end where Jefferson says Hamilton's nothing without Washington. And so that's fun. So at number 39, we have I Know Him. This is the first song on this list. That's by King George. I like all three of his songs a good bit, but this one is just not as good as the other ones to me. He pretty much just comes out and he's like, who's going to replace George Washington? And then someone comes and tells him that it's John Adams. And he's confused and laughs and says that they're going to tear Adams apart. And it just kind of further emphasizes the narrative that the American people then did not really like John Adams at all. And it was very clear to even the British king who they just defeated that they didn't like John Adams. So coming in at number 38 is the Schuyler Sisters. I know a lot of people probably really enjoy this one. It's just not that great to me. I think it's fun. I think it's a good track to introduce how Angelica and Eliza are looking for a smarter man, and they want a mind at work, as they say. And it shows off Angelica's intellect and how she's on par with Alexander. But like I said, it's just not super special to me. I don't know. I don't have a lot of fun listening to it. I think it's a great way to introduce their characters. And got the Anne Peggy line, which is just about all Peggy gets. We see the personalities clearly. It's an important track, which is why it gets up here, because it establishes those three characters. I guess really two, because Peggy kind of vanishes. But this is where it lands for me. Coming up next is for 37, we have the cabinet battle, the first one. And the reason that I like this one more than the other one, as I said, was the ending. And that is Washington still giving that wisdom to Hamilton, and kind of like he's taking a side, but he's also showing that he's not just backing everything Hamilton does for no reason. And Hamilton keeps throwing up these ideas, and Washington keeps emphasizing that this is Hamilton's fight, and Hamilton's got to find his own solution for it. And the battle as a whole is cool. I like that Hamilton calls out Jefferson for his slave antics. Historically, though, Hamilton's not excused from slavery issues either. But I think a lot of times people don't really mention, I guess we do more so nowadays, but people don't mention Jefferson's slavery troubles, or you can call them troubles, but I like that they brought that up then. Number 36, we have Take a Break. And in this track, Hamilton, I believe, let me back up. I'm going to explain it a different way. Angelica is coming back from somewhere, and she is her analyzer are wanting Alexander to come with them to their father's house, but he won't. He refuses. He has to get his bill passed through Congress, and it won't happen for him. And it turns out not to be the best thing for him, because he ends up having an affair from staying home over the summer. But the song, it sounds cool. It further emphasizes the love triangle between Angelica, Eliza, and Hamilton, and you can see how both of them really, really want him to come with them, which is a little weird from Eliza's standpoint. But hey, yeah, I mean, it's a good setup song to show that Alexander is about to make a big dumb decision when his family is gone, and that's exactly what he does. But we get to that much later on for this list, at least. So for number 35, we have "Stay Alive," the reprise. Now, I like the melody of this as a whole, with the kind of like haunting "Stay Alive" or whatever. And this one I think is really emotional because this is the scene where Philip he's been shot, he's infected, and he is dying in the doctor's office, and Eliza and Hamilton are at his side. So it's definitely a sad scene, and this song's got a lot of emotion to it. I like the other one more. This is the reprise. I like the original more, and I'll explain more when we get there soon. But this one I think is a really nice, touching track, and it's a good send off for Philip, especially with how they end with the counting in French that we see Eliza teaching him when we first meet Philip. So very sad, very emotional, big heart tugger there. At 34, we have "We Know," which is after Jefferson declares that they need to confront Hamilton because as long as he has a pen, he can be a threat. And they come in and they accuse him of embezzlement, and Hamilton is like, "No, I haven't embezzled anything. I haven't committed treason. I just cheated on my wife, guys. It's cool." And he explains the whole thing with the cheating scandal, and Jefferson, Madison, and Burr are like, "Oh," and it's kind of an interesting scene to see how quickly he's willing to ruin his family life over his he'd rather how quickly he'd rather ruin his family life than let his career be tarnished. Sadly, this moment tarnishes his career anyway. So I guess you got to put yourself in his shoes. I don't know what I would have done. Probably not have just outright said everything though. But it's cool. They come in, they say "We know," they don't know, and then Hamilton lets them know. It has a very ominous ending with Hamilton saying, "Burr, will you use this against me when we go toe to toe?" And Burr says, "Rumors only grow, and we both know what we know." And that's it. So it's pretty ominous, and those lines might be what drives Hamilton to do something later on that we'll cover in a different song. But yeah, this one I really like the melody in the beginning when Jefferson, Madison, and Burr are kind of going back and forth and back and forth, and just listing off his crime line by line, or at least the crime they think he did. So that's pretty fun. And Hamilton's explanation is interesting too. And then at 33, we have the original "Stay Alive." And this one I like more just because we hear the individual members of Hamilton's friend group, Mulligan, Lafayette, Lawrence, and Hamilton himself, kind of go through and list off what's happening during the war. Hamilton talks about how they're eating their horses. Lafayette mentions needing supplies from France, and Hercules goes back to do his apprenticeship. It's just a cool moment to see how the war is taking a big toll on all four of them, and it's a tough war, and they're trying to stay alive, and they're trying to win this war, but it's definitely not easy on them. And so I think I put this one over the reprise just because of that. I like the character building of those four characters. I think they're some of my favorite characters in the show. I like them more than Philip. So, oopsie. And then number 32, we have "What Comes Next." This one is a pretty cool song message-wise to be delivered from King George, the comic relief of the show. It's He comes out and he says, "You won the war, good job. What comes next?" And I think at some point in the song he says, "Do you know how hard it is to lead?" And that can be seen throughout American history. After we've freed ourselves from the British, we definitely had a few times where we've been a little iffy on our presidents, and King George is right. It is pretty difficult to lead a country, I'd assume, and we bounce back and forth. And he thinks, funny, like, "Cool, you're free." You got the awesome wow, but he mocks the country, and now everything that happens is on whoever the leader is. And so it's a fun track, good message. Got the nice King George comedy in it. So I like it a good bit. And then that was number 32. So coming up next at 31 is That Would Be Enough. And this is the track that comes after Meet Me Inside. It's a nice moment that Meet Me Inside sets up. You think it's about to be a sad moment in the show, but then he comes home and Eliza's like, "Hey, I'm pregnant. Just stay. It's fine that you're not at war. We don't have to have a legacy. We don't need money. Just stay here and raise the kid." And everything seems to be going that direction. Hamilton kind of sobs for a little bit about how he can't provide for Eliza. He doesn't have money. And Eliza, I mean, she embraces him and is like, "No, we're good. We don't need money." It's a sweet moment between the two of them. And we see Hamilton in a much different way than we see him in most of the show, where he's just kind of cool. He's not actually going out and being a hothead. It looks like Washington and Eliza's combined wisdom settle in on him. And this That Would Be Enough melody is recurring throughout a lot of the show, so that's very important as well. But Hamilton does not stick to that advice. I mean, he gets called back to the war later on, and that's that. And we get right back to hot-headed Hamilton, so that's fun. Coming in at number 30, we have The Story of Tonight reprise. So this one, mixing up these two, at first was hard, but after listening to them pretty good, I really got what I wanted to do. And I put this one lower just because the other one is more of a good message, and this one is just kind of funny wedding jokes. You know, Hamilton's just been married, and they're like, "Oh, you'll never be free again," and so that's fun. And they've got their dancing where they say "the newly not poor of us," and they're thrusting their hips and stuff. It's a fun song. It shows their brotherhood very well. But I think the other one has a good message, and so it just stands out as much higher on this list to me. And yeah, that's this one. So for 29, we have the Reynolds pamphlet, and this one is the aftermath of Hamilton being a dummy boy. And by that I mean he publicly published his whole affair and let the whole world read it, and specifically stated that the affair even took place in his bed while Eliza wasn't home. And so he just dropped it all out there. And this is a really fun track as we have Jefferson and Madison, even King George dancing around him and yelling, "Never gonna be president now." It's a big falling point for Hamilton as he has shattered everything that he has just because he didn't want to be seen as a treasonous. Probably much better ways he could have solved this issue, but I guess he thought Burr was gonna speak out on the affair, so he was like, "No, I'll ruin my own career." Bad choice, I think, but that's what he did in real life, and yeah, it probably did cost him his chance of being president, and it sent him on a downward spiral. So after the Reynolds pamphlet, at number 28, we have the election of 1800. This is the biggest moment of downward spiral for Hamilton, at least in what causes him to die. This is the election between Jefferson and Burr is openly campaigning. He's no longer calm and waiting for everything. He wants to be in the room where it happens. Hamilton is kind of chilling. He's just lost his son and stuff, and he's got his wife back finally, and he's just kind of walking through the streets, and people are like, "Hey, you gonna vote for Jefferson or you gonna vote for Burr?" And he doesn't really answer. He kind of keeps just avoiding it, and then eventually it gets to a tie, and they need Hamilton's vote to decide who's going to do what. And Hamilton says he's voting for Jefferson because Jefferson has views where Aaron Burr has none, and that gets him killed. I would, at least pretty much almost directly, as Aaron Burr thought that his friend was going to side with him, but instead he sided with a man who he disagreed with for his entire life, pretty much. And Burr is just immediately upset about it. You can see it in his face. Yeah, it's bad decision for Hamilton. Even if it's understandable that you want to pick the guy who has known views versus the guy who has absolutely no views, you know, it still leads to him getting killed. So bad decision as a whole. Number 27, we have Washington on your side. This is Burr and Jefferson. I think Madison. Yeah, Madison too. They're all stepping up, and they're like, wouldn't it be nice to have Washington on your side, and kind of envying Hamilton, as throughout the show they've been thwarted by by Hamilton and Washington, because Hamilton wants to do something and Washington's like, yeah, cool, let's back it. So it works out pretty well for Hamilton all the time because he's got Washington there. At least that's how Burr sees it. and he starts singing, "Wouldn't it be nice to have Washington on your side?" And Jefferson joins, and Madison joins, and it's kind of where they team up initially before they do the "We Know" song and stuff like that. Although this partnership doesn't last forever, but it's a cool song. It really sets in stone the downward spiral of Hamilton as these three enemies of his all unite together. And then coming in at number 26 is probably the most controversial thing for this list, and that is "Helpless." I know a lot of people really like this song, and some people probably think it's Eliza's best song in the show. And I do like the hook of it a lot. I like the like blessing, stressing stuff. I think that stuff is pretty cool. But I really hate the intro of it. The ooh doop 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 whatever. I don't like it. Her voice, something about it, it just irks me when it comes on. And I would rather not listen to that. If that was just a small sample, it'd be bottom. But because there's the rest of the song, it isn't bottom. And it is number 26. I do think this is a good song as a whole, and because that's only like in the very beginning and somewhere in the middle, it's not super bad of a thing. It definitely doesn't drag the song entirely. I if I ugh, I could go without that. But yeah, I do like the in the living room stressing, asking for a blessing. I like the overall melody of it, and I like that it's recurring when it comes back and satisfied, and it just really kind of shows how Eliza is, at least with this love stuff. And I think it's a good song for her character, but oof, that intro, it just it drags it down for me, man. At number 25, we have "Blow Us All Away." This, the title of it makes it kind of sad too, because in another song, Burr and Hamilton talk about how their kids are going to blow everyone away, and this is Philip's big song. He's mad that George Eaker has talked trash about his dad. He challenges Eaker to a duel, and he's supposed to blow everyone away. Hamilton's like, just aim your pistol at the sky. If Eaker's honorable, he won't shoot you. That doesn't happen. Philip is shot. As we talked about earlier, when we talked about the Stay Alive reprise, Philip, he goes down. That's it for him. He gets shot pretty quickly in the duel, and George Eaker seems to have no remorse, and poor Philip is gone. I don't know. The character Philip in this show is a little weird because we have a guy playing a grown man as John Lawrence. Then he comes back to play a 9-year-old in the second act. And then I know he's not 9 when he's shot, but still. It's a little weird to me. But rest in peace to my boy Philip. I know he died in an earlier song on this list, but this was his downfall. He was just as cocky as his father was, and he died just like his father will. So, shame. And at number 24, to round out the bottom 23, we have Aaron Burr, sir. This is the second track on the album, aside from we have Alexander Hamilton, the big intro song, and this one really kicks off the plot. Hamilton arrives, and he meets Aaron Burr, and he talks about punching the bursar, and they kind of form a little friendship, and not George, uh, Aaron Burr says his famous line, talk less, smile more, don't let them know what you're against or what you're for, which Hamilton hates throughout the whole show, and it's kind of the driving point of their tension, which is cool. There's some cool foreshadowing here too. One of Burr's first lines to Hamilton is "Fools who run their mouths wind up dead," and that's exactly what happens. And thanks to Burr that Hamilton winds up dead. But this song also has some cool stuff at the end of it, where we get introduced to Lawrence, Lafayette, and Mulligan. They each have a nice verse together, and then Aaron Burr has his own little verse with them afterwards because they ask him to have one. And that transitions into my shot, where Hamilton's supposed to look like the lyrical masterpiece over these old classical writer guys. Fun track, cool track. Not better than, in my opinion, than any of the things above it, and not worse than anything below it. I think it's a great intro track to all these characters. You meet half the first act cast right here, and it's very effective. But these cast members shine a lot better in a lot of other places. So at number 23, we have "You'll Be Back," which is the first King George song, but it's the last one for this list. We are in the top 23 now, by the way. We've made it halfway. And at this point, I will say it was a lot harder to rank things as we got into these last 23, because these are some good songs. but "You'll Be Back" lands here. We get to meet King George, in all his glory in this song. He comes strutting out in his big robe and crown, and he talks about how people don't want. They say they won't pay the price of his war, and or price of his love is not one they're willing to pay, and they want to go to war with him. And he says they'll come back to him. It's fine, and with that, America is his sweet, submissive subject, his favorite subject at that. And it's just a really nice introduction to this insane man, and it has a nice comedic value as it kind of splits the tension in the show for a little bit. Not that there was a whole lot when this originally happened. I don't think, like, I wouldn't say that this song came at a super tense moment. It came right after Farmer refuted, as it got interrupted with a message from the king. So I mean, it worked well, but and it set him up to come in later as some good tension breaking comic relief. At number 22, we have Right Hand Man, which is George Washington's introduction. A lot of Georges. George Eaker, King George, George Washington. Oof. This one's really cool. It starts off as just kind of like your average like rap track from this album. They're talking about the war. They're talking about what's going on. And then all of a sudden they start this, "Here comes the general." And he comes out with the "We are outgunned, outmanned, outplanned. And they got to make an all-out stand." Really nice introduction to George Washington. And it sets up Aaron Burr as even more of the villain as he tries to get the job with Washington. He's talking to him, but then Hamilton comes in because he was called by Washington, and George Washington tells Burr to close the door on his way out, and the jealousy begins, or at least continues. So this one's really cool. It's got a lot of character development, and we get introduced to Christopher Jackson as George Washington, which is amazing. At number 21, we have another introductory song with "What Did I Miss?" And this one is Thomas Jefferson's introductory song. He comes in, and this is the first song for Act 2. He was in France for the whole war, and so he's just asking Madison questions and trying to figure out what's been going on. And he establishes his very erratic personality, and it's just a really fun jazzy track that I like listening to. Daveed Diggs is great as Jefferson. I prefer him as Lafayette, but he's definitely great in this part. And then at number 20, we have The Story of Tonight. So number 30 was The Story of Tonight reprise, and so 10 spots up is where I put the original one. And it's kind of solely for the message of it, the scene on screen of seeing these 4 people of color talking about how they're raising a glass to freedom and how they're going to be remembered. And although the characters in real life weren't actually people of color, I do think that the actors' portrayals of them and that they are people of color is what makes the song's message much better. And it's really cool to see that, and I think it's nice, and it's got a nice sweet melody to it. You can kind of chill to it. I like it a good bit. Number 19, we have the sexy song, which is "Say No to This." This is after Take a Break, when Hamilton goes full stupid and ruins his career, but he just hasn't announced that he's ruined his career yet. Mariah Reynolds comes to him, and she's like, "Oh, I need a place to stay," and he takes her to somewhere, or walks her to her home or something eventually, and then he says something like, "Her legs are spread," and then boom, he's in trance, pow. And then he says that he wished that was the last time it happened, but then he says it became a pastime, and we get the scenes of him trying to ask the Lord how to say no to this woman as she dances around him and fuels him up. And yeah, it's it's a weird turn for the show, but it's a really nice song. It's got a nice groove to it. It's actually really fun. And then we have the interlude in the song from James Reynolds, who comes in and slaps Hamilton pretty much and is like, "Hey, have fun sleeping with my wife. Just give me a little bit of money for it, or I'll tell your wife." That's where the whole embezzlement thing comes from, even though Hamilton wasn't embezzling, as we learn. But it's a big bad situation. And at number 18 for me, we have Hurricane. This is Hamilton's, I think, his only solo song in the album, or in the play, which is interesting. But he he has just been confronted by Burr, Madison, and Jefferson, and his big brain is like, yes, I will solve this problem by exposing my affair to the entire world." And this is just kind of going through his life story and saying all the troubles he's faced and how he's faced death a lot. He couldn't seem to die. And then he talks about how he's wrote his way out of all situations. So he thinks that he can write his way out of this one too. Sadly for him, he writes himself into a much worse situation than he was writing himself out of. But I guess he thought he wrote his way out of everything else. He can do it with this one, and that just did not work out as good for him. Number 17, we have Your Obedient Servant. This is right after the election of 1800, and this is where we really hear Leslie Odom Jr.'s Aaron Burr sound like a twisted villain, as he first starts off angry and says, how does Hamilton, an orphan, bastard, poor son, all that stuff, vote for Thomas Jefferson instead of him? And then he writes the letter and he's like, hey, I've been looking at my past, and everywhere I failed, it was you. And he's like, if you have something to say, name a time and place face to face. And then Hamilton's like, nah, I ain't apologizing. Here's this big list of 30 years of disagreements. Burr kind of stands his ground. He's like, careful how you proceed. And then he says, answer to the accusations I lay at your feet or prepare to bleed. And Hamilton's like, nah, me no apologize. And Burr, in a much darker sounding tone than a lot of the rest of the show, says, and stand, Alexander. And they set up the duel, which kills Alexander. And it's a pretty dark, sad moment as we see Burr is angry and twisted enough to finally go to this. And in a song earlier on, which we will get to really soon here, Burr says that duels are dumb and immature, but he's come full circle after this lifetime of failure that he thinks was Hamilton's fault. It's a very nice sounding song between Hamilton and Burr. They both have some really nice lyrics and deliveries in this, and the message of the song is intimidating but really nice. So for number 16, we have Burn, which is Eliza's reaction to Hamilton's big dummy move of releasing the Reynolds pamphlet. Eliza comes out and she's got the letters from Hamilton, and she's talking about how she's just reading everything and trying to figure out where he started going wrong. And she kind of sees things, and he's always concerned about his legacy, and she thinks that he's too concerned with it. And she's taking herself out of the narrative and burning any letter that has anything to do with her reaction to this and has anything to do with Hamilton being a good person. She wants him to fall for this, and just completely erases herself and erases the good Hamilton, or at least what she has of the good Hamilton. That is not the final thing that happens in Hamilton's story. He does have other things. That's how we know stuff about him, but Eliza does do her best here to just get rid of the man. And I think for this one, this is one of my favorite Eliza songs. There's one more that's primarily her on this list, but I think this one as a whole is her best performance. For number 15, we have the 10 Dual Commandments. This is just a really fun track. It samples Biggie's The 10 Crack Commandments, which is cool, but it sets up the tone for the 3 duels throughout the show. We get the rules explained in probably the most meaningless duel-ish between John Lawrence and Charles Lee. It's a quick song. They set up how it works. They set up the individual feelings about it. This is the song where Burr says duels are dumb and immature, and so we know he has that mindset, but then later on he crosses it. And they've got some really cool vocal parts, like when they say pick a place to die where it's high and dry. That's really nice, just the way it sounds. And they've got some pretty cool lyrics in here too, like when they get to number 9 and they say like, look him in the eye, aim no higher. So that's a cool thing to think about, scary to think about. You're in a duel with a man and you're staring him in the eye and, aim no higher. Shoot to kill, I guess, although that's not what happens in the first duel. So number 14, we have It's Quiet Uptown. This is probably the saddest song on the album. This is when Hamilton, they've just lost Philip, and he is walking through the streets and talking about how much Philip and Eliza would like it. He just wants Eliza to forgive him, and he gets Eliza eventually to hold his hand, and they sing the melody It's Quiet Uptown together, and you got the people, the chorus in the background singing, and it just sounds really, really, really nice and somber. It's just really sad. And then Hamilton does big ugly cry in it too, and that's not something you see for him. So it's definitely a sad song. If you want to be in a good mood and you also want to listen to the Hamilton soundtrack, skip this one. But if you want to hear just a beautiful song from the intro from Angelica, Hamilton's parts, the chorus's parts, This one's really good. At number 13, we have Yorktown, alternatively called The World Turned Upside Down. This is the triumphant victory song. They've just beaten the British, and it's they're excited. Well, at the beginning it's talking about how they beat the British. It's Hamilton's brilliant plan of take the bullets out your gun, so no misfires happen. They sneak up, they ambush, they win, and then at the end we get a lot of lines from all the individual characters. I think this one also has the immigrants we get the job done line, which is nice. It's cool, good message for the play. At the end they've got the triumphant thing, everyone yelling, "We won, we won!" Really, really high energy song. Hercules Mulligan steals the show when he comes out in his part. He's just his intensity and stuff, amazing. After number 13, we have number 12, which is Guns and Ships. Guns and Ships in Yorktown, I knew would not end up being in my top 10, and so they've kind of landed just out of it. But I also didn't know which one to put over the other. They're very, very equal to me. But Lafayette's part and Guns and Ships is amazing. He steals the show. He's my favorite character in Act 1, I think, to listen to. I just like the accent and stuff. It's very fun. He sets the Broadway record for the fastest verse rapped, which I didn't mention earlier. In Washington on Your Side, he also has a pretty fast verse there too, which is fun to listen to. But this one, he just goes crazy, and then they convince Washington to bring Hamilton back into the war, and he's back on the whole "I gotta have my legacy" thing. And coming in at number 11 is the exact transition from there, I believe, is "History Has Its Eyes on You," which is Washington bringing Hamilton back to the war, and he's like, "Hey, listen, you got your first command, but you gotta know, when I had my first command, my men were led into a slaughter, and everything you do now, people are going to be watching." And this is kind of like Washington's theme song throughout the whole thing. It's like, and a lot of the other melodies, he comes out with the "History Has Its Eyes on You" and stuff. It's a big thing about who's going to tell your story, and you don't get to pick, which comes up pretty soon for this list, actually. But yeah, this is a great track from Washington, and it keeps up the role of the wise mentor very well with this song. And at number 10, we have "Who Lives, Who Dies, Who Tells Your Story," which is the closing track. This one's pretty sad, but it's also kind of happy too. So it's like a happy, sad song. It begins with Washington talking about you don't get to choose who lives, who dies, or who tells your story, as the title says. And then it transitions into Eliza being the one who tells Hamilton's story at the end, and it talks about her trying to make sense of all his writings and get them published and continue his work. And then her biggest work is the orphanage. And it ends with her doing a big gasp, and that's just kind of up to interpretation for the different Elizas, I think Lin-Manuel said. Really nice track, really, really smooth sounding. It's somber, but it's also got a happiness to it, especially when she's talking about the orphanage. And we've got all the characters in the background, and it's really cool. I like it a lot. At number 9, we have Alexander Hamilton. So we have the closing song, and then we have the opening song. This is a great rap recap of Hamilton's life. They describe him as a person. They talk about what he did, who he kind of worked with, who he worked against. And Burr says how he's the damn fool that shot him, and it's just really fun as a whole, and it really gets you amped up for the show as each character or each actor comes in. They're not really in character yet, and says some lines about Hamilton, and we just really build up into the show as a whole. And I think this song is just really cool. I like all the individual parts, and then I like the Hamilton coming out kind of in the middle of the individual ones from the side characters, and then ending with the "What's your name, man?" And then it's cool. I like this track a lot. Really good opener. For number 8, we have "One Last Time." This is Washington's send off, and I like this song a lot for 2 main reasons, and that's why it's in my top 10. Reason number 1 is Christopher Jackson's voice in the song is really, really good. The way he sings the "one last time" and holds out the last and everything, it's just phenomenal. And they managed to put Washington's actual farewell address in the song and have him and Hamilton sing it together. And I like history a lot, and I think that's really cool to hear Washington's real farewell address being sung by George Washington and Alexander Hamilton as his kind of farewell from the play. He does appear later on as kind of like a ghost Washington, but this is, I think, the last time we see him alive is during this song. and it's pretty sad, but it's really bittersweet, and it's just really pretty sounding, and it's got the real nice historical context. There's some places in the show where they don't exactly stick to real historical things, but you can't argue with this one because it's directly from George Washington. At least most of it is. So coming up next, we have number 7, and that is going to be "The World Was Wide Enough." This is an emotional roller coaster. Burr starts off explaining the 10 dual commandments, but in his own way, and it's not actually the dual commandments. He's saying, here's 10 things you need to know about the duel. And he says things like, Hamilton took the first place. He was looking for a man on a mission, or he's looking to the world like a man on the mission. He says Hamilton was wearing his glasses, and he's like, why, if not to take deadly aim? He says he only had one thought before the slaughter, and that was that Hamilton was not going to make an orphan of his daughter. So these are all very understandable things to think about as you're about to shoot a man. And then as the shot happens, we get Hamilton's perspective as he talks about his life through everything. And he's like, is this where his death is going to get me? He says he thinks about it all the time. And he's like, is this really the end? And he goes through and he's like, I'm going to get to see Philip on the other side. I'm going to get to see John Lawrence, George Washington, my mother, all these things. And then he's like, wait, but Eliza? But he's like, Eliza will be fine. I'll see her when she gets to the other side. And he does what he instructed Philip to do and aims at the sky. And Burr is not expecting that, I guess, which historically we don't really know what happened, but this is how the play does it. So Hamilton does what he told Philip to do, aims at the sky, Hamilton gets shot, and then Burr is like, he's sad about it, which I'm also not sure if it's fully historically accurate, but this is about the play. And Burr says he tries to walk to him, he's ushered away. He hears all the sadness in the streets, or the wailing in the streets, as he says, and that he should have realized that the world was wide enough for Hamilton and him, and it's just a really pretty song. From here on up, I had a really hard time organizing songs, like especially, and this one even was in my number 1 spot for a little bit, but I kept shifting things around. But this is a phenomenal almost closure. This is the second to last song, and it wraps up the duel from both perspectives very well, and then we get a really nice sympathetic side of Aaron Burr as it closes. In number 6, we have a much different tone of a song as we move on to My Shot, and this is kind of like Hamilton's theme song. He's not going to throw away his shot, and he wants to do anything he can to get whatever he can, whatever he's after. He will do what he has to do to get it, just like exposing your affair and tearing apart your family. But it's really cool. It's got some pretty cool lines. This is the song that establishes him as like the lyrical genius, as opposed to John Lawrence, Hercules Mulligan, and Marquis de Lafayette. It's really fun. It appears a lot throughout the last even in the last previous song, "The World Was Wide Enough." He says like, "Should I throw away my shot?" or "If I throw away my shot," or something like that, because he throws it away. He does not shoot. So it's got a big meaning for the whole show, and it's really fun. It's really upbeat. It gets all the characters we know already involved pretty well. Definitely very fun to listen to. And at number 5, we're in the top 5 now. Number 5 is going to be "Nonstop." This one is the closure for Act 1, and it's amazing. It starts off with them saying after the war they're going to go practice law, them being Burr and Hamilton. They work together for a little bit, and then the Burr starts the melody of "Why do you assume you're the smartest in the room?" And he keeps that with different lines, and he says, "Soon that attitude will be your doom." It was. So that's cool. I love the foreshadowing. Hamilton is talking about fixing injustices and how proud he is about it. Then we have a little intermission of Hamilton trying to get Burr to help him defend the new constitution, but Burr does not want to. And then we move on, and we get Angelica singing to him, and we get Eliza singing to him, and then we get George Washington asking him to be his treasurer. And then it comes full circle. Burr talks about the Constitution and how Hamilton wrote 51 of the essays, and Madison and John Jay did not do as much, like nowhere near as much as that. And then the ending is just like a culmination of all these character songs. You hear Washington singing "History Has Its Eyes on You." Burr is in the background singing the "Why Do You Write Like You're Running Out of Time." Angelica is singing stuff about being not satisfied. Eliza, I think, is singing "Helpless" or something. I don't think it's "Helpless," but they're all singing something, and then it all comes down to "History Has Its Eyes on You" in a big big hoorah, and then Hamilton says he is not going to waste his shot and walks up the stairs to join George Washington officially. And that kind of sets the pace for the much more politically charged Act 2. I would say the war is definitely political, but Act 2 is all about the cabinet battles and stuff, and we get that set up by Hamilton joining Washington there at the end. And it's a really good melody of Act 1, and it really sets up everything, or it really kind of caps off very well everything Act 1 did. So I love Nonstop. Number 4. I know a lot of people have what my number 4 is their number 1, but it is my number 4, and that is going to be Satisfied. So this song I like a lot. I think Angelica's voice, what's her name? Renee Elise Goldberry, Gold something. She's really good with Angelica. She's perfect. Her voice is amazing, and she plays the character very well. And the song is a great recap of how she feels during Eliza's Helpless, because she thought Hamilton was going to be her man, and the lyrics in the song, the way it's delivered, the way everything's choreographed, this one just is really really good. And the whole Satisfied thing kind of comes back to haunt various scenes, like in Nonstop, Angelica singing about the Satisfied. Later on, when he betrays his family and does the Reynolds pamphlet thing, she comes back and she's is singing to him about how Hamilton will never be satisfied. And it's just a kind of a haunting thing for Hamilton, at least throughout the whole show, that he will not be satisfied. And this is where it kicks off here. And every time Angelica sings it, it's really good. But personally, to me, it's not my favorite. I don't know. I like the next 3 songs a whole lot because I like the character who's prominently in them, his voice a lot. So it's just a little bit of bias for me. But this is my list. So, but Satisfied could definitely not be out of the top 5. It had to be up there. So here it is. Number 3. These next 3, I mixed around a lot, but what I have now is what I'm happy with. Number 3, we have "The Room Where It Happens" by Aaron Burr. And this is kind of his descent into villainy, which is a lot through the rest of the show. Before this moment, he's much more calm, and he's much more kind of concealed about what he wants to do. And like in Nonstop, Hamilton says he doesn't understand how he stands to the side, and Burr says he'll keep all his plans close to his chest. But here, Hamilton goes to a meeting with Jefferson and Madison, and Burr is not happy about it. He wants to be, as he says, in the room where it happens, and he also doesn't trust the deals that are going on in there. And he says that nobody will ever know what gets traded up. Or he says, "No one knows how the sausage gets made," is one of the lines. That's a great line. But the song has a really nice jazzy, boppy feel, and the lyrics slowly kind of evolve from "nobody knows what's in the room when it happens." Or Hamilton comes out and says something, and says, "What do you want?" Or eventually, after scolding him about not ever getting what he wants, and then Burr says, "I want to be in the room where it happens," and then that evolves into angrily, or kind of just really passionately yelling, "I've got to be in the room where it happens." And this is where Burr's character changes, and he's now doing whatever he can to get what he wants, and it's just a fun track with a lot of good meaning to it, as far as the overall story goes. Number 2, we have "Wait for It." This is the exact opposite of what the room where it happens is, at least for Burr's character. This is where he establishes Hamilton is reckless. He does whatever he wants. He just takes and he takes and he takes, as Burr says. And Burr says he's going to wait for it. And he says he's the one thing in life he can control. He's not worried about trying to pursue everything hostilely. He's just going to sit back and chill and let things come to him as they're supposed to come to him. And he's got the cool melody of love doesn't discriminate between the sinners and the saints. And he says the same thing about or life doesn't discriminate, something like that. And he says death doesn't discriminate against the sinners or the saints. And that comes back later on after he shoots Hamilton. But this one's just really pretty. Leslie Odom Jr. sings very well in the song, and the lyrical message of it is actually really, really good. With the whole "I am the one thing in life I can control," that's true. And so it's a really good song. I like his voice. I like the message of it. But it's not my number 1. It's very close. It's so close to being it. But my number 1 song on Hamilton, personally, I think the best song in the whole show is "Dear Theodosia." This song is just wow to me. I love it. I first didn't think this one would be my number one. I knew it would be in my top 10. But as I kept listening and listening to make this list, it landed here. Burr's voice in the beginning is amazing. I could listen to that all the time. It's just wow. The lyrics about how he's gonna do whatever he can to make sure his daughter, Theodosia, grows up in a good world, uh, and how that's those are nice. And then Hamilton comes in and sings about Philip and how he'll do whatever he can to make the world a good for his son. And we have Hamilton and Burr sitting across the stage from each other in different spotlights, and they're singing to their respective kids. And their voices, Lin-Manuel Miranda's and Leslie Odom Jr.'s voices, merging together for the hook of this song, so to say, is really nice. And the parallels between both of them just trying to make the world right for their kids is also really good. And this kind of stings a little more when we hear later on Burr say, "I will not let him make an orphan of my daughter." So it's it's definitely it's a heart wrenching track, but it's also really nice to hear these two characters who are exact opposites have something in common and just be so at peace for at one moment in the show. I think it's like right after the war and stuff. It's right before Nonstop, I do believe, and it's just it's wow. Let me make sure. Just yeah. So it is the second to last track in Act One, and so they've gone through the war and all this stuff, and they finally got a victory. And these two men just sit down and sing their hearts out to their kids, or their upcoming kids at least. I think neither one of them are born yet. But that is going to be my list. I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you agree with me, let me know. If you disagree, let me know what you think your top songs would have been. Like I said, I love Leslie Odom Jr.'s voice, and I end up putting three of his songs at 1, 2, and 3. Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this. Thank you for listening if you made it this far, and I'll see you guys in my next video.